thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy these western suburbs because I've been to Hopkinton, and a few months ago I was at the town of Harvard Garden Club, and there's something special, and I do mean that, about these western northern suburbs. It's a pleasure to be here. And tonight's topic is window boxes and containers. So I'm going to show you different designs for all 4 seasons here in New England. There are some slides from different parts of the country and the world, and when we look at them, we will be looking at design concepts. I've already had some great practical questions, and I will address how to put together a window box from the ground up, if you will. I'll talk about soils, I'll talk about lightening the soil, providing moisture to the soil, fertilizer, maintenance, pretty much all of it. And I welcome your questions as well. I will stay at the end for extra questions. After the slides, I will do a demonstration of putting these plants together in the light-colored container. So give me a moment to set up the first slide here. Make sure this is keyed in with the projector. Good. Okay. How are we doing on focus? I forgot my distance glasses, so tell me, do we need focus? It looks good? Okay. Because I do have focus on the projector. Milford camera, are you looking okay? All right. So this is in the north end of Boston and comes with kind of a good story, I hope. This was a client of mine who had a beach house on the Cape, which is beside the point. But when you do the beach house on the Cape, in terms of design, it's kind of like, and can you do the window boxes outside the Boston condo? So, and they had already written the recipe for the window boxes. This is their design and not mine. But I got around that. And they ordered up salmon, pink impatiens, and white impatiens, and vinca vine, because this is what they had planted since their girls were born, who were now in college, okay? So I didn't want to lose the contract for the beach house on Cape Cod. But happily, the people down the street, I take no credit for this design. The people down the street bravely added caladium to their red impatiens. And notice how they chose the caladium with the red vein mixed with the red impatiens. And I thought, someone's broken the mold. So I took that as a chance to take a flying leap, and probably had something cold to drink at the Cape House. And I said, geez, you know, I do have a degree in landscape architecture. What say you trust me enough to change the venue in your window box? And they thought, oh my gosh, here it comes. So anyway, I had tremendous good fun spending an hour or 2 at my favorite annual supplier, greenhouse, walking up and down the aisles, collecting things, putting things back, changing it, and I came up with this. So, in reverence to history and the salmon pink impatiens, I kept some of those. I added trailing petunias, coleus of different varieties. The blue spire is Pacific blue salvia, some deep purple petunias. This is a shady spot. It seems to be sunny in the spring, but once the trees leaf out, shade. So this has to be treated as shade. It does get some bright sun at noontime, which is kind of nice. The plants get a boost of energy at noontime. So I was retained to do this. year after year, and it was a lot of fun. So when you choose colors, usually choose one side of the color wheel, one side being the cool colors and the other side being the warm colors. So mostly cool with one accent from the hot color side, and the other scenario would be the reverse, mostly hot colors with one accent from the opposite side. Seems to work. Let's close up on that. We'll see coleus in detail. That offers a tremendous amount of variety, and that can go from sun to shade. So that's your plant that goes under any conditions. We'll see some great varieties of coleus in an upcoming slide. Lots of maintenance here. That's another thing we'll talk about. So here you go on the streets of Plymouth, Massachusetts. This is a nice mix, nice and full. I like to see window boxes overflowing almost from the start, although you do have to give them space to grow from spring until late in the season. I believe this is late in the season, August or September. However, if I were to talk about this artistically, I would say perhaps a little bit wider on the window box. I like to take the window box from the middle of one shutter to the middle of the other shutter so that it kind of wraps around the window a bit. And the window box should be the same color as the shutter or the house. So again, you have a choice. Beware white window boxes. I don't think I have to tell you why. It's going to show up all the dirt. And we'll see the window boxes that I built for myself, and I'll talk more about that. Here's some more. Good stuff, nicely done. Your manufactured window boxes can be difficult to work with, and I'll talk to you about building my own window boxes myself so that it had adequate soil capacity. But anyway, here's some down in Providence, Rhode Island. Nice mixture of plants. A lot of foliage is carrying this, and that's something to consider, because if your blooms take a week or two vacation, like most of us do in the summer, what's going to carry it? Foliage. Foliage is always there, especially the bright greens, the dark reds, different textures in foliage. That could be an asparagus fern in the center or a bacopa. But I'm going to ask you, who wants to say what they would have done differently here? Balance. Right. Move the light green. Okay. Good. I would have as well. They may have bought them all done up and not had a choice other than to flip the window box to the opposite side. Otherwise, very high marks. Nice, beautiful house in Providence. So this is my house. So I get to say, this is everything you're not supposed to do. But it worked out. I built these boxes myself because they were to be quite long. The windows are rather large. This is a 250-year-old house. And I wanted to go in length from middle of the shutter to middle of the shutter on the other side. I think if I remember right, it's 54 inches. They're over 4 feet. And I was 20 years younger then, and I could actually lift him. But what I did was I put them up and then filled them with soil. So let me tell you the process. I bought pine board, put them together square, lots of holes in the bottom, just with a drill about every 4 inches, a 1/4 inch hole, so that you get plenty of drainage. You don't want plants to sit in soggy water when we get that thunderstorm. Then I primed them, and I painted the inside, I believe, twice, and with latex. and the outside 3 times, and I mix the color. I have a swath of myrtle, the vinca ground cover in my front yard, and I wanted to imitate the color of the vinca leaf. So this is Hunter Green by Benjamin Moore with a quart, or rather a pint, a gallon of Hunter Green, Benjamin Moore, with a pint of navy blue. And some people were taking their bike ride past the house one time, and I was weeding somewhere, and someone said, "Look at the color of those shutters." And I thought, it worked. Anyway, so planting the window boxes, never do it on a 95-degree dry day with a stiff wind. And you can see the wind, if you will, in the way the salvia vine, blue Pacific salvia, is bent over in the wind. And it was right in the hot sun. Never do that. I had some help at the time. That was the impetus to get it done. So I put the window boxes up, and we have a long shot of this. I put all the window boxes up and then filled them with soil. And one of my more critical friends, thank God for them because I've gotten a lot of good ideas, said to me, "Hey, Carol, you've got 2 in the foreground, 2 in the middle, and 2 actually behind the overly grown mock orange at the end of the house. How are you going to deal with the sun shade conditions?" And I kind of said, "Oh, yeah, right." So I said, "I'll rotate them." So that was how I got around it. I would take the 2 nearest to us one at a time, put it on the wheelbarrow, roll it down to the end, and rotate it. I was 20 years younger. Okay. So anyway, to go back to the middle slide, they did succeed. If you're a good gardener, or we're all good gardeners, I apologize, we're all good gardeners. If you're experienced, you can deal with it. And I also packed these in 1/2 compost and 1/2 loam. So it was really good stuff, which is what I have here tonight for you. And I like the tall plants, the Pacific blue salvia. They reach up to look in the window, and you can actually see the plants from inside the house. So let me go back to that. And this is another scheme. And I will admit that I plagiarized this from a storefront in Marblehead, where I thought, that is just spectacular. In my situation, it was too light color scheme because the front of my house is bleached in sun all afternoon. I need strong colors. I need dark colors like you saw in the slide before. But I just had to put this together, mimicking that storefront in Marblehead that I saw 20 years ago. So this is licorice vine, the helichrysum, and that's expensive, but you can winter that over if you have bright sun conditions inside. Yellow coleus, which is very hard to find. A petunia that's almost white but has a yellow cast. And pale yellow marigolds. That is what is in here, and I enjoyed it a lot. I did it one year. I didn't do it again because it's okay in the evening, early morning, but midday, because I'm not home midday anyway. So this is a delightful little retirement home on Cape Cod. And I had a client around the block, and I kept driving past that. I said, this is just perfect. It's an adorable house, and the fence is only about 18, 24 inches tall. They've used mammoth impatiens, both in the window boxes and in front of the fence. They should get an award. It's really nicely done. Scale. Very important. This is another storefront in Marblehead, and they have done a gray and white scheme, almost like a white garden, with blue articles in the store window. And really, their store window is the focal point, because they want you to come in and buy something. So they do the subtle window box technique to show off the storefront window. Here's another good example of scale. This is a bank in the city of Seattle, and very, very impressive mammoth containers. These are actually redwood planters hanging on chains because they need a lot of strength with the brackets and means of keeping everything safe and sound. And these are watered by truck. There's a service. They come around with water on a wand and water whomever because it's so far off the ground. Okay. And another large-scale planting in Newport, Rhode Island. This is a public seating area. They want things to be bold and eye-catching. And then in London, this is we can use this in the summer. This is a laurel tree or a bay tree. And here I took this slide because the container matches the entranceway so well. It's the same type of stone. The container may very well be manufactured, man-made, but the match is perfect. So consider the container. Buy the container for the site. And we'll see some other examples of that as well. And that's just a common chrysanthemum and some begonias and some ivy or vinca vine there. Another consideration of tone and charm and scale is a beautiful real estate office in the town of Concord. And who wouldn't want to walk in past these cheery buckets of pansies in the spring? We could have that now. Probably not last Thursday and Friday, but hopefully we're safe. Here's another one where the container planter blends right into the surroundings. And you can tell how old this slide is. When was the last time you saw a bay of phones, pay phones? This is Sturbridge Village, and just a really well done arrangement of salvia and coleus and red impatiens and red in the permanent plantings as well with the red that is barberry. So looking at the surroundings all around. What does the building look like? What are the permanent plantings nearby? And what will work in sun or shade? Okay, varieties of coleus. There are many. And coleus will winter over inside, so you don't have to buy it every year. You can also propagate it by cuttings. It was probably my first plant introduction when I was preschool, was making cuttings of coleus. You know, you got the milk container from school, you know, you've all that. This is at Alan Haskell's, or I should say the late Alan Haskell of New Bedford, very famous designer from the South Coast who had an outstanding nursery, which is, by the way, now a national landmark in New Bedford. He was that good that his nursery is a national landmark now. So varieties of coleus, and they will go from sun to shade in a variety of colors. So that's your foliage filler for almost any situation. This is really fun. There are no planters here. This is taken in England at the estate of a very famous designer who is also not with us any longer. Makes me feel old. And the story goes that it was a hot afternoon and the gardeners didn't have enough lemonade and they were tired, so they started throwing chunks of hens and chickens at each other. And some of them landed on this terracotta roof, and they're sort of still there. So that's fun. Christopher Lloyd. Many books to his credit. So if you want a good English garden designer, Christopher Lloyd. And another really fun planter, one of those trough containers, if you want to make a statement with a container like that. I usually don't spend a lot of money on containers, but this is quite good. And they've picked up the color of the container with some of the orange plants, accented with blue, keeping with the warm colors. Very well done. Now, how long would it take you to realize there was hosta and ivy in the window box under the window?
Wow. Yeah.
That's Alan Haskell. That's how you get your place to be nationally recognized. Alan Haskell, again, with a very subtle stone trough planter and some ornamental grasses at his garden center in New Bedford. The city of Seattle. I believe this is real terracotta. Seattle may be able to do that, real terracotta, because they don't have the freezing conditions that we have here in New England. They also make very excellent faux terracotta. And here's one I had to deal with for years and years and years. This favorite client of mine, I'm going to say that on camera, Don Rodman Ford. I went to school with his sons in the town of Canton, and they have become one of the best Ford dealerships on the South Shore. Anyway, I did Don's homes in Canton and on the Cape. And one day he said, Carol, I got some planters. They're at the house. And can you just fill them like 3-4 times a year? So I said, I'd love to. And I drove up and I thought, oh, sure. They're industrial planters, really, but the scale is correct because it's a good-sized front entrance, and the color is correct for a brick house. What we had to deal with was South Florida heat conditions because the exposure to the afternoon sun here is similar to my house, only this brick house reflects the heat. The alcove set-in entrance creates a heat pocket. It is very, very warm. So I can use only Florida plants and plants that really survive a lot of heat. And I did these up, as I say, 3 or 4 times a year, all season. These were oleander trees, native to Florida. Wanted to get some size in there so you could see these, notice these from the street. And then these trees were potted and brought into the house or the car dealership in the fall. And this was a fall mix for Mr. Rodman, and this is Dracaena centerpiece there, Dracaena grass, and that can go inside in the winter. And then 2 types of sedum. The Rosy Glow in the foreground, that's Rosy Glow. And in the background is sedum matrona, which blooms in a white. And that comes, of course, into bloom after the one in the front. Subtle compared with the first slide. So sometimes the landscape is very important, and you just want an accent to break up a beautiful walkway through a lovely English garden. It's a gigantic terracotta that may or may not be stored inside during the winter. Southern England, again, doesn't get as cold as we do here in New England. Alan Haskell, fabulous planters outside of a little cottage door. Bougainvillea vine on a trellis with bacopa, only good in the spring. Bacopa, it doesn't like the heat. Again, in England, one of the most famous estates, one of the most famous gardens of the last 100 years, called Sissinghurst Castle in Kent. This is their herb garden. This was a self-contained country estate supporting probably 30 or 40 family members and staff. So everyone was fed from the land on site. And these are all the herbs. They're medicinal herbs, herbs for beauty and for cooking and for scent, for potpourri, and an amazing container in the center. Look at the relationship between the paving here, which is actually slivers of old brick, with a succulent. Not at all creating a statement, but just supporting the soft beauty of the herb garden. Another one from England. Kind of matching the plant material to the container. Ornate handles on the container, so we've got some helichrysum licorice vine that will stand up to the conditions as well. If your city house is on the street and you want privacy with people walking by very, very close, just fill up that window. Kind of a city thing, so I will go past that one. Here is one of that I did for a client in Cambridge, and the red seed cone is sumac or ailanthus that you will see by the side of the road come October. And it weathers well. It will weather all winter if we don't get a lot of snow and ice. So it will last into January, February, if we don't get a very large snowstorm, combined with some ornate ornamental cabbage and kale in terracotta. And in Switzerland, they have a variety of shades of green and blue in the evergreens and the large pine cones and the cat o' nine tails. We might not have those trees, although we have duplicates, or I should say alternatives. The large fluffy one on the right-hand side up against the glass could be done with red pine. Red pine is not terribly common. It has 2 needles per fascicle, and it's a great filler because it's so large. It takes up a lot of space. We have blue spruce, we have cat o' nine tails, we have a lot of great cones. If you can't find it on your own property or a place where cutting is allowed, what you can get are greens from the West Coast that are sold in some nurseries. And you can buy a big box at the Flower Exchange in Boston. Or you can buy the swags, and take them apart and fill a container. This is pretty large, but we can imitate this. And it will last all through the snow and ice. What doesn't work that we have here is hemlock. It falls apart. Holly doesn't stand up to the cold. It turns black. So stay away from those. So jealous. London has cyclamen all winter long in their window boxes. I grow them in my back room at 45 degrees all winter long. I've kept them for 10 years. They flower every year. But, you know, we're all equal, you know, even though they have cyclamen all winter long outside in their window boxes. Grasses can do a lot for you in changing the look without doing the labor. Grasses will look one way in the spring and then turn into a plant with great seed pods or fronds, and then change color again in the fall. And I believe that is the end of the slides. So if we could have some lights on to the plant materials, and I can take questions as we go. Yes?
I'm thinking about the drainage in the pots that don't have holes.
Yes.
Stone and,
You're right, and I'm going to talk about that right now as I put together. I'm just going to, okay. All right, so, yes.
I have one time ventured into a window box. It was absolutely gorgeous. It was a plastic window box that hung on probably wrought iron or something like that.
Uh-huh.
I filled it with flowers. It was absolutely beautiful. And within 2 to 3 years, my windowsill had rotted. And so I just had to do away with it. What was I doing wrong?
Well, I would say there was a small space between the plastic window box and the wood, which remained wet for a long time, and that's what rotted the windowsill.
So when you're hanging the window boxes, you need to make sure they're not touching the house at all?
It's best, yeah. Leave an inch to an inch and a half space between the window box and the house so you get that airflow. That doesn't happen, yeah. Okay, so this is Columbine, as you probably know. I had great fun last Saturday going to my favorite greenhouse nursery in Plymouth to choose plants for you. It was 35 degrees and spitting snow. I said, you know. And let me get this out. It's a little root bound, I can tell, because it's not easy to come out of the container. You can kind of coax it a little bit. All right, turn it upside down, and there we go. And it is fairly root bound. So what you want to do when you're taking plants from one environment to another is give them every opportunity to be successful in the new location. So I have soil in here, and I'm going to dig a little bit of a space there. If this were outside, I would be using the watering can all the way, but obviously we're not doing that. So this is somewhat dry soil. I took it out of the garden yesterday. It's compost and loam that I purchased. What I'm doing now is actually, it's difficult for a lot of people to do. If you don't like to prune, it will be painful for you to break up the roots a little bit. And but what it does is create a slight injury in the root system which causes the roots to grow out, regenerate and grow out. So I'm setting this in. I'm going to take a look at the level, because I want the level of the plant to be a little bit lower than the rim of the pot so that so that it can be watered. So this is a columbine. A lot of you probably have it in your garden. It's a perennial. And it was great fun choosing these plants. I walk up and down the aisle, as I said earlier, and take something and some more and put it back. And after a half hour, people think, what is she doing? And, so anyway, I purposely didn't groom the plants because that might be good to show for everyone. And I think these plants were outside one night, and then they had to come inside for 6 inches of snow that we had on the southern hemisphere. I live the other side of Boston. I thought, no, I have to do this for Milford. And so I brought them into my sunroom. And what I'm doing is taking off pansies, blooms that are gone past their prime, and taking the whole stem. A lot of people do this, I'll show you. A lot of people snip it here, and they leave the stems, so it looks like a rabbit did the work. A new bloom will not generate unless you take the stems off, so do that. And I'll just clean all these up so I can put my gloves back on. I can't really do this well with gloves on. You could do this with a scissors if you want to save your hands. And also what you can do, if you don't use porous gardening gloves, these are plastic on one side and cloth on the other. If you use rubber gloves, like for doing dishes, I put on hand lotion before I put the gloves on, and then you come out with a hand treatment at the end. I didn't wear gloves until I was about 30 years old, and I thought, if I don't wear gloves, I'm not going to have hands by the time I get to be this age. So I'm just going to set these here because I'm not sure the mix. So I went with the warm colors, the red tones, and a pink, which adds another dimension, a little softer than the others. And then the cool color, which is this deep bluish purple pansy. And I actually had to learn this name, I confess. Bellis parenthis, which is not a very common name. It's called Romanette Mix. Anybody seen this before? I had? Yeah, okay. I don't get out of my small country town enough. Okay. Questions while I do? Yes. Right here? It's Romanette Mix. Yep, I have the Latin name. Latin name is Bellis. That's columbine. Oop. Bellis perennis. Romanette Mix.
So that's an annual?
These are all perennials. Except pansies sometimes winter over and sometimes not. So, okay. I'm going to put this here. Yeah?
The height, is there a measurement? Is there
A
formula?
scale and height kind of has to do with how big your space is. Where is this going? If it's next to the patio, you might want something all taller. I would use the tallest plant about as tall as the container for the most part. Let me take apart some of these. I don't know how many of these we'll use. Here's one that's darkish red. When I was searching for the yellow coleus for my own house, what I found was you can't buy a 6-pack of yellow coleus. You get a mix, so you end up giving all your friends a boatload of coleus. All right, back on with the gloves. These are $2 at Job Lot, and they wash, go right in the washer. And also, to say a word about containers, I was looking through Job Lot down where I live. It happened to be the Middleborough store, which is far, far away from here, about 70 miles. And they have some excellent container choices. So I know you're going to be doing containers for your plant sale. And Diane told me that, and I think that is a fabulous idea. I've actually said that to other clubs and organizations who run plant sales. I've seen it done in the nurseries. This cost, and this is retail, $8 for the container and $32 for these plants, including tax. You can get yourself a means to buy wholesale. It will be a lot less. So this is $40, $39.99. This would sell probably for a minimum of $65. Okay, so you're getting well paid. And I would love to know. I would love to know how you do with that. So please keep in touch. My website was on the first slide. It's caroljulien.org, and my contact information is on the website. If you want I'll give you my email address right now if you want. It's Carol Julien. That's CarolJulien 231 @gmail.com. So do let me know how you do with that. I'm always interested in how clubs progress and what questions you have. And I congratulate you on your award for Junior Achievement Gardeners. And I'll tell you a story. Back almost 100 years ago, after I left Massachusetts College of Art and went into landscape architecture in New York, I am a recipient of a scholarship by the Canton Garden Club. Thank you, Canton Garden Club. And so it's a very beautiful thing that you clubs, all you clubs do for the community and for the young people and for the older people, and the work that's done in places where shut-ins can enjoy it. A little bit more soil here. So I would say job one for the club is to get a good source of reasonably priced containers that are not heavy. That would be job one. Something that can be researched, over time. And then get a source of wholesale plant materials. And then go into thinking about sun and shade. Draw up some combinations that will work in both sun and shade, partial, not full sun or full shade, but kind of that in between. Trying to serve the most people to sell the most containers and do well at your sale. So I'm just adding soil to build up. And this is, as I said, it's half loam purchased and half compost. Compost is excellent stuff. Can't buy a compost as good as you can provide at home. And I was going to speak too about keeping things watered. And there's a good story from the Garden Club of the Back Bay. About 20 years ago, the soil additives first came out, the Terrasorb and a lot of the other varieties of crystal that you use to hold water in the soil. And as I say, this is about 25 years ago at Back Bay on Commonwealth Avenue. And it was fairly experimental. It hadn't been on the market once for too long. And one of the women said right about now, as I explained how you add the Terrasorb to the soil after you've soaked it in water so it's expanded. And she said, yes, that's really important because somebody on the other side of, Back Bay, she didn't say who it was, put the dry crystal into the soil, then put the window boxes on the edge of her balcony, then watered. Everybody with me now? Then watered and watched the plants slowly rise up out of the soil and fall down 4 flights onto someone's nice morning walk to work or something. So I've never forgotten that story. Never enough planning in the gardening and design business. Actually, there is, because don't sweat the small stuff. And you don't have any 4-story balconies out here in Milford. Because there are what is called happy accidents, and no matter how much you plan, there comes a time when you have to put it all together. And I promise you there will be what I love to call happy accidents. And you'll see things in a different light. The sun will come up more strongly the next day, and you'll look at something and be amazed at something that happened that was a happy accident, thing that you didn't even realize was going to be part of it. So there you have it. This might be appropriate from 360 degrees. So now, obviously, whoever takes this home, water as soon as you get home, or you can do it in the morning. It was a little bit moist. And it does have drainage. I didn't put anything in the bottom. Stone just adds pounds and pounds for drainage. And so there is a drainage thing there. And it's got about a 2 to 3 inch space down there to contain the water. And what about fertilizer too? Try to provide all your nutrients naturally, but if you need to supplement, petunias are a case in point. Petunias tend to be very vigorous and then wear out. So what I like to recommend with petunias, and I also use only organic fertilizer. I like fish-based fertilizer. Neptune's from Maine is very good. And there'll be a dosage directions given on the package. Take that dosage and divide it in 4, okay? So using a quarter, 25%. And use it weekly instead of once a month, as the package will probably tell you. That way, when you give a 25% dose weekly, you're giving a little fertilizer each week, rather than the big bang, and you see vibrant growth on the petunias that may have faded out by midsummer. How many have seen petunias in window boxes that have grown down to here by the end of July and have one bloom on the end? Okay. You don't have to say who, that's okay. The situation there is that you should begin pruning. None of this needs pruning except for taking the dead blossoms off. Petunias, as I say, they'll grow long, have one bloom at the end, and then you realize that in midsummer and say, oh, it's kind of past its prime. So pruning begins the week after planting. And if you had a row of petunias, you would go through and take every 6th or 7th vine stem on the petunia, snip it all the way back. It's very hard to do. Have a glass of lemonade while you're doing this for strength. Every 6th one, and then keep that up every 2 weeks, pruning. That way, there's a constant rejuvenation process. And you never end up with the long petunias with the split ends in their hair. And, you know, that's a way around that. Questions from you? Yes?
I have a question. Do you work much with portulacas?
Portulaca loves the heat.
Yes, I have a place up in New Hampshire, and I'm not there all the time, and that's the only thing that I can grow in my window boxes. And they usually make it through the whole summer because they're drought resistant.
Yep.
Is there anything else you could put with them?
It's a desert
Right.
plant.
You know, like I would like something else in there besides them.
Sure, a real strong drought resistant
Some type of
succulents
succulent.
will do it. Trying to think of plants that are used on the seashore.
I actually tried them in Milford last year too, because I'm back and forth, so, you know, like, it worked pretty well. My place in New Hampshire gets really nice sun there.
Okay.
I really love it there.
Good.
It did fairly well in Milford too.
And it's probably not too hot, so that makes the moisture last longer. Email me, and I'll think of another.
You know, I just would like to put something in there with it.
Right. Will geraniums do it? How long is your absence from New Hampshire?
Sometimes 2 days, sometimes 3 days.
Oh, geraniums will do that.
I don't know, not in this spot. It's a really hot spot. I've tried I've been there for a long time, and that's the only thing that I could have, that in August I still have a nice window box. Everything else just dries out.
Okay.
I'm
Try-
sorry, I've never heard of that bell tone before, so I'm just gonna ignore it, but it is my phone.
Try a larger soil volume. Try a larger soil volume, and that will create more moisture around the roots. Or try the soil additive that holds water. I know people on Cape Cod, which is quite warm, can survive from 1 week to another if they're only down there on weekends. And it works for them. Somebody asked me about avoiding having to use all this soil because this is heavy and it's expensive and you're taking all your good loam and compost out of the garden. So there's a couple things you can do. If your plants don't need all this depth for the roots, what you can do is invert a container inside. So there's an airspace there, not weighing anything in terms of soil. You also have a lot of holes here. So you want to find a cloth material or a screening material that will prevent the soil from leaching down and filling up the container and upsetting the system. You could, instead of the pots, you could also use the packing peanuts that come from getting mail order stuff. And again, you need the soil separator. They actually sell a soil separator in some of the nurseries, garden centers. And because this planter probably only needs that much depth for roots. So this soil is all just wasted expense, lots of heavy stuff. Yeah?
Can you go back to the soil?
Sure.
What to use? I mean, do you use a bag of Miracle soil?
I don't use chemicals, okay, for one. I have friends that do, so I like to use a natural mix, and here's a great recipe for you. 40% compost, and the percentages are by volume. So as long as you use the same equal measuring means, 40% compost, 20% wood ash coming out of your fireplace or your wood stove. Wood ash.
And the alternative to that is?
Buying the alternative at the garden center. I think you can buy something comparable. So that's 60%. 20% bone meal or superphosphate, which is in the analysis it's 0-20-0 in pure superphosphate, and 20% blood meal. So you're mixing that up by volume, and make as, whatever you need. It keeps from year to year in a dry place, dry closed container.
If you purchase those kind of products at a nursery, are they pasteurized, or would you run into issues with animals digging them up?
You probably would. Bone meal and blood meal are going to attract your rabbits and what have you. Compost will not. And compost, have your soil tested. Have your soil tested by a soil test kit, or send it to UMass Extension Service. Look that up online. They used to be out in Amherst. They're around different places. Have your soil tested and then amend per the results of the soil test.
There are several of us now, though, who live in condos, so there's no soil to be tested, so we would have to purchase.
Okay, yep. Products from State of Maine, that's a brand name, State of Maine, are very good. There are a lot of good organic mixes out there. Yeah.
In place of wood ash, do you use lime? That's sort of heavy.
You don't want that much lime. Lime changes the pH. Lime is not a nutrient as much as it changes the pH. And that's very important. I'm glad you said that, because you want your pH to be in the middle of the scale. Scale is 0 to 14. And you want the pH at about 6.5 or 7. And you can add lime to your garden, your lawn, 52 weeks a year. It will go to work. And without a pH neutral in the middle of the scale, your nutrients are not as readily absorbed. So in other words, you're wasting your money when everything good isn't being readily absorbed. And it's not going to be as successful. So pH, thank you, very, very key information.
So what would you use in place of wood ash? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but ask the nursery. Send me an email. I'll get you the answer. Yeah.
When you plant your window boxes at the end of May and they're all beautiful, should you expect them to last all summer and stay nice? Or, mine typically kind of, like this one here, the columbine's going to stop blossoming in 2 or 3 weeks and you just have leaves.
That is true. I was limited to perennials. There were no annuals on the market other than pansies because it was early April. When I do this program again in May and June, I'll have a myriad of annuals available. They're simply not available in the market.
Well, you mentioned like the
So-
clumber you said doesn't survive well when the heat comes. Are there like plants that you know of that are standbys that you would plant if you wanted it to last all summer?
Helichrysum does, and your vinca vine.
Flowering plants, any
Flowering
flowers?
plants, lantana. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some I put flowers in, I got 4 of them, and some I have some vegetables in. Do I need to just start from scratch every year, or can I take out half from each container and replenish the soil that way? What do you recommend?
I recommend a soil test. That's going to take the guesswork out and replenish as needed. You can get a soil test kit at the garden center. You don't have to send it off to UMass. They have pH kits by themselves, and they have soil test kits as well, the garden center, yeah, and amend as needed. Any other questions? Okay. Are you going to do a raffle for this?
We are.
Okay. Thank you very much.